Hello students! Today we're going to be going over pages 17 through 30 in your Pentathlon booklets. This is Basic Elements of Music Theory. I will be going over every single page and reading alongside you, so please make sure you have your highlighters out. This way, you will check off the homework assignment to read pages 17 through 30, to study the content, and to watch this video. Let's get started! Basic Elements of Music Theory, Sound and Music. Definitions. The broadest definition of music is sound organized in time. Many kinds of sounds, including noises and tones produced by any means, not only by musical instruments, can be used to create music, particularly in the modern era. All that is required is a time frame, sound waves, and an aware mind to recognize and interpret those sounds. So once again, these are some of the definitions you must remember. We're going to go ahead and underline those right here. It's sound organized in time, and you need a time frame, sound waves, and an aware mind to recognize and interpret those sounds. Common but not required factors include a person, often called a composer, who first imagines the music, a person or instrument to generate the sounds, so that's the musician, and a means of recording and reproducing them. So sometimes that might mean a studio recording or even the reproduction, which means to write the music down so someone else can replay the same music. Sometimes the composition and performance happen at the same time, often as improvisation. So improv means where you don't practice something beforehand, it's not written down, you just do it in the moment. All right, now let's move on to music of the Western world. When we talk about the Western world, we're really saying places like Europe and America, places that are like not Eastern, like Asian countries and places like that. So Western means European. All right, it should be noted that many cultures have significantly different views of music. In some cultures, music is so interconnected with ritual, language, dance, and other aspects of life that in some languages there is no separate word for music. At certain times in history, Western traditions have encountered and incorporated the music of non-Western cultures, and in recent decades, globalization has made the boundaries between Western and non-Western culture increasingly permeable. Globalization is where the countries all around the world are now more interconnected and they're able to communicate with each other, and news flows quicker than ever before because of the internet, because of travel, and because of people's curiosity. Permeable means when one thing can go into another. Like in science, when something is permeable, it means that like one liquid can go into another area because there's like open holes or something, right? So that means that Western and non-Western cultures, they kind of mix and match. An example of this would be, for example, K-pop, which is Korean pop music, right? I know you guys know about Psy, who was really popular with Gangnam Style a few years ago, but basically that's an epitome of Western and non-Western mixing together with American pop and the new kinds of music that are occurring in contemporary times influencing Korean pop music, and vice versa, and Korean pop music affecting American pop music, right? Or you could even say whenever a country has hip-hop or rap music, which originated in America for sure, and you see those influences in other countries as well. So it's all a mixture. Nonetheless, the material in this guide will pertain to what is called the music of the Western world. Now, why do you think we're going to be talking about music of the Western world? Well, guys, our entire pentathlon theme is on World War II. And World War II is essentially going to be seen through the perspective of the West. We're not going to be looking at World War II in the perspective of Japan or any of the other countries. We're going to be looking at purely through the Western perspective, which is the Allies. And the reason why is because we're in America and that's the perspective we're going to be taking. And so I think it's really interesting when you guys get a little older or even in college to study the same things that you've been studying as middle schoolers in different perspectives. It's very eye-opening, but I believe that for our purposes in pentathlon, we should really just focus on the Allies and the Western world and the Western influenced in terms of music and art. So let's go ahead with that. the musical traditions that developed in Europe in the past 2 millennia and their cultural extensions in the Americas. So you guys all know that America was originated from 13 colonies under British rule. So it is undeniably a fact that we have a lot of European influences in our American culture. All right, so let's go ahead. Instruments as sound sources. How is a musical sound wave produced? So we're going to be talking about sound waves. In the late 19th century, two ethnomusicologists, so if you don't know what that means, you can break it down. Ethno, so that's somebody who studies like ethnicities and cultures. Music, you guys know what music is. We just said that it is sound organized in time. And the word ologist, which means someone who studies something. So somebody who studies the music of different cultures, or in other words, the modern term for scholars who study the music of other cultures. That's exactly what I said, didn't I? That's the beauty of breaking down word parts, guys. Or who study multiple cultures comparatively. Kurt Sachs and Erich von Hornbostel characterized instruments into 4 groups. And yes, guys, you do need to know these. These were on the test last year, so you do need to know the different categories of the instruments. You must memorize them. There are chordophones, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and put those in pink, and then I'm going to go ahead and underline some of the examples like violins and harps, things that you pluck with your fingers that have strings, bowed or struck. The vibrating string creates the sound wave. All right, so it's the vibration of the strings. Then we have aerophones. If you think about aero, doesn't that sound like air? Well, that's exactly what it is. It's brass and wind instruments that create varieties of horns that are created. Right, brass and wind instruments such as the many varieties of horns and flutes feature a vibrating column of air. So while the chordophones are vibrating strings, aerophones are the vibration of air. Then we have membranophones, which are, if you don't know what a membrane is, it's a very thin skin. So if you think about like the cell structure, have you guys heard of like the cell membrane, right? So it's a really thin skin, kind of like if you think about a grape, the skin of the grape is the membrane. It's not super thick like an orange, but it's very thin and can be easily punctured. That's a membrane, all right? So when you think about membranophones, and by the way, the word phone, do you guys know what that means? It means sound. Have a skin or other membrane stretch across some kind of frame. Okay, so once again, that skin. Think about what kinds of instruments have a skin that's very thin and can be punctured. Well, if you thought about it, do you guys know? Probably drums, maybe, right? The membrane, but not the frame, vibrates when struck. So when the membrane vibrates, it makes a noise. With idiophones, the body of the instrument itself vibrates when struck. So idiophones is another type of instrument. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. I believe they categorize it into 4 groups. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. The body of the instrument this time is the thing that vibrates, not the air, not the strings, not the membrane. All right, so they're all categorized by what it is that vibrates. Some examples of idiophones are bells, wood blocks, and xylophones. A 5th category was added later. Oh, so I guess they just made 4 and then they changed their mind and made a 5th one, and that is called electrophones, which create sound waves using a mechanical device known as an oscillator and are dependent upon electricity. So these are all dependent on electricity. So there are more of, they probably developed this 5th category because this is more modern since we have more instruments that are electrical now. Centuries before Sachs and Hornbostel, Western orchestral instruments were grouped into families. These categories are still used for Western instruments today. And so you can kind of see this when orchestras are organized, when composers or the conductor talks about each part of the orchestra. There's a string section, which is the stringed instruments, right? Which are probably chordophones because they are with strings that are bowed or plucked. Then we have brass instruments, right? So brass instruments, which are aerophones, once again back there. So these families can be categorized into the 5 categories up there, right? Which are aerophones made of metal, are sounded by the performance buzzing lips, which make the column of air vibrate. Remember, the air vibrates with aerophones. Then we have the woodwind instruments, which are also other aerophones, but instead of being made of metal, I believe that they're made by other things. Aerophones in which the column of air is moved by breath alone, as in the case of flutes, recorders, and related instruments, or by 1 or 2 vibrating reeds, usually made from wood, okay? Not all of them are made of wood, right? Some, like for example, recorders, a lot of them are made of plastic or types of different materials. Then we have percussion instruments include membranophones as well as idiophones. Percussion instruments are like those drums and things like that, plus some chordophones that are struck rather than bowed or plucked, such as the piano. Interesting. So the piano is considered a chordophone, okay, and you strike it instead of bowing and plucking it, because if you look at the back of the piano, there are some chords or strings, but you don't pluck the strings themselves. You actually push the wooden keys on the piano keyboard. And in some cases, keyboard instruments can constitute a 5th category as well. So you do need to know the 5 families, which are string, bass, brass, woodwind, percussion, and keyboard, and the 5 categories: chordophone, aerophone, membranophone, idiophone, and electrophone. So please know what those are. The first electronic instruments began to appear in the first decades of the 20th century. The theremin is one of the best known early electronic instruments and is still occasionally used today. When playing this instrument, the performer regulates frequency with one hand and amplitude with the other by disturbing the electrical fields that surround the protruding bars. So now we have some buzzwords here that you may be unfamiliar with, but we're going to be talking about these. These happen to do with wavelength and with waves, sound waves. So we have frequency and amplitude. All right, we're going to talk about what that means. The next important step in electronic instruments came in the end of World War II. Enormous advances in electronics and radio technology had been made for wartime purposes, but after the war, many state-of-the-art studios were no longer needed for military purposes. Within a few years, scientists and composers began collaborating to make art with the new equipment. Electronically generated sounds and sounds produced by live instruments were recorded on tape, where they could be edited, manipulated, and mechanically recombined to form collages of sound that were performed via loudspeakers. And in today's world, you would call that just mixing. It's widely practiced in the music industry, and you see sometimes they make remixes of famous songs. You'll see a few DJs or people who love electronic music. They'll see remixes as well, right? This type of composition was first known as musique concrète, but this word comes from French. The term used is French due to the fact that the first practitioners were based in Paris. The basic techniques of tape music, later followed by more purely electronic music produced on computers, which are what's popular now, are looping and splicing. So looping is where you play something over and over and over again. And splicing is where you cut things and you put something else there, or you just cut it and add a different part of a song. Both of which permit compositions that cannot be reproduced by a human performer. You have to use the tape mix back then, and in today's world, you would have to use a computer to do this. Rome, Paris, Cologne, and New York City all had famous post-war centers for electronic music. Pretty cool, right, guys? You thought electronic music is something of, today, but it's not. It actually originated post-World War II. Properties of musical sounds. Here's the next section. I'm going to use a different color of highlighter. I hope you guys are reading along with me. We're trying to cross out 3 check boxes in one right now by highlighting and studying and watching the video all at once. Remember, you do not have to write any notes down. I just want you to pay extremely close attention to everything I'm talking about. And I am going to be embedding a lot of different images and video clips and sounds to provide more context about the information I'm providing. All right, a single isolated musical sound has 4 properties. All right, so the properties of sound, here we go. Pitch, duration, volume, and timbre. I know that looks like it it should be pronounced timbre, but actually you pronounce it timbre. I know this because I remember my professor in college talked about this, and he corrected us all because we all wanted to say timbre instead of timbre. All right, pitch. What is pitch? So let's go ahead and use a different color for pitch. Pitch is the highness or lowness of sound. So if you want to remember pitch, think about a Chihuahua versus a Saint Bernard. A Chihuahua has a very high-pitched bark. A Saint Bernard has a very, very low-pitched bark, right? So the pitch is highness or lowness. A kitten's meow is higher pitched than the tomcat's yowl. A tuba is pitched lower than a piccolo. Here's a tuba sound. And then here's the sound of a piccolo. When musicians speak of a pitch, they're referring to a single tone whose highness or lowness does not change. An octave, however, is a little bit different. So let's go ahead and underline octave. It's a musical term for the distance from one pitch, for example, in A at a frequency of 220 hertz and the next higher A at 440. So if you look at the keys of a piano, hopefully there's one here. Perfect. So if you guys know a little bit about music, I know a little bit about music. I used to play the piano, so I'm going to try to explain this to the best of my ability. I don't know if Martin's watching. He's definitely a pianist, right? An octave is, let's say this is the key C, right? An octave higher would be a C that's higher right there, right? That's one octave. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 apart, right? So let's keep going. As you can see, the frequency of the sound wave is higher as the pitch gets, where's the rest of the thing? As the pitch gets higher. Let's go ahead and write that down. I feel like that's really important, okay? So I'm going to just go ahead and write that down, okay? So basically, the higher the pitch, higher the frequency, the higher the pitch. All right, I hope you guys write that down. Okay, moving on. Maybe I'll move it down here so you can see it better. There we go. Let's go ahead and look at this very quickly. This is a wonderful table here. I think you should all look at this very, very, very carefully because it shows you the classifications. Remember, we had the 5 classifications, and we also had the different family words, and we just talked about this. This is something you probably want to memorize as to your best of your ability. I'm going to go ahead and circle this here, okay? Very important. Pitch on a keyboard. A piano keyboard provides an excellent visual aid for understanding pitch and harmony. All right, high-sounding pitches are to the right, and low-sounding pitches are to the left. That's true. If you go up here, right there, then we have a higher pitch, okay? You can write all of this down, guys. Oh, by the way, this whole thing, you know how I showed you guys earlier what, if you go from a middle C to a higher C, what is that called? That's called an octave. So I'm going to go ahead and write that down, delete that, put that right there. Hope you guys are all writing all of this down. If I'm going too fast, pause the video and then write it down and then play it. Okay. All right. Pitch and on a keyboard. Pitch and harmonies. High-sounding pitches are to the right. Low-sounding pitches are to the left. Therefore, moving from left to right is called moving up, obviously, because you're going from low to high, right? While moving from right to left is called moving down, okay? So, you know, why not? Let's do that. Up. We're going up, okay? And then if you go the other way, you're going down, okay? So let's go ahead and that's what that means, and that's what that means. All right. Middle C is the white key right there. That's the middle key. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, right? This is the C, which is do. It's the first middle key right there. It's on the white key, and it is at the center of the keyboard. The black keys are arranged in alternating groups of 2 and 3. We have 3 here, we have 2 here, we have 3 here, we have 2 here, we have 3. You got it, guys. You know it, right? The black keys are arranged in alternating groups of 2 and 3. Middle C is located to the left of the group of 2 black keys, closest to the middle of the keyboard. Figure 1 identifies middle C, A440, A220, A110, and the names of the other keys on the keyboard. Note that all the A's appear between the upper 2 of the 3 black keys on the keyboard. The distance between any 2 adjacent keys on a keyboard is called a half step or a semitone. All right, so the distance between any keys. So that means from here to here, that's called a half step. You do need to know this information, guys. I'm telling you. All right, next, if you go a whole step, is the distance between every other key, regardless of color, black or white. So if you go from here to here, right, because you're going from every other key, because if you were going from the C to the C sharp, then that would be a half step. But since you're going to the C to the, not C sharp, but the D, okay, that's called a whole step. So I'm going to go ahead and write that. Since it's getting a little messy here, let me change it and do it like right here. So if you go from here to here, okay, because you're skipping this black one, that would be called a whole step. So let me write that there. Go move that here. There we go. Maybe I should like, there we go. Okay, so that's called a whole step. And then is the distance between every other key, regardless of color, black and white. Both half steps and whole steps are the basic intervals of any scale, a sequence of pitches in ascending or descending order. Intervals are the spaces between the keys, okay? And a scale is this. Listen to it. All right, so a scale is a sequence of pitches in ascending or descending order. The white keys are usually called the natural keys. Those are the white ones. And spanning 7 alphabetical letters, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The symbol that represents a natural note is this. That's normal, right? It's the white ones. If the natural sign is omitted, musicians still assume the pitch is natural, but sometimes the symbol is included for clarifications. The signs of this hashtag, sharp, and this little B, which means flat, indicate that a given pitch, such as A sharp, has been raised or lowered respectively by a half step. So the next note to the right of A on the keyboard is an A sharp, okay? So basically, this is A, right, guys? And then this right here would be called A sharp, okay? But it says right here, it doesn't just have to be an A sharp, it can also be a B flat. Here's why. You can also look at that same A sharp key as being a lower neighbor of the key to its right. In other words, if you move a half step to the left from B natural, the same A sharp key can also be called B flat since it is half a step or one key below B. So this is B right here, right? So going back here would be also a B flat. So this key can be considered an A sharp or a B flat because when you guys look at the black keys and you're moving to the right side from the black keys, okay? If the black key is to your right, then that's called A sharp. So that's to the right side, right guys? And then if the black key is to your left, so this is B and it's to the left, then it becomes a flat. So it would be a to the left, right? So I'm going to go ahead and draw this for you guys. Okay, if you didn't know, I know a lot of you guys know how to play instruments, so you probably already know this, but there's a couple of you who may not know. So this is a D, okay? This is an E. I'm sure you've heard of like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do and stuff, right? Okay. This is an F. This is a G. This is an A, as you already see it right here. And this is a B, and then it goes back to middle C. Okay. So then, what would this be, right? What would this black key be? Well, if you're looking at from the C section, you would go C and then you would go right. So that would be a C sharp. But this could technically also be a D flat. Do you guys see that? This could be a D sharp or an E flat. This could be an F sharp or a G flat. This could be a G sharp or an A flat. This can be an A sharp or a B flat. Scales and intervals. In the Western tradition, most composers choose a set of 7 pitches as the basis for a piece of music. When arranged in ascending order, ascending means going up, which means this way, going this way, right? The 7 pitches are known as diatonic scale. I think this was a question last year. And the pitches fall into 1 of 4 different patterns, major and 3 varieties of minor. The C major scale is perhaps the most common scale. Listen to it. The piano keys needed for this scale are shown in figure 3. This is figure 3. So do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Do not touch any of the sharps or flats. Just go from C to C. That is a diatonic scale. Major and 3 varieties of minor. The C major scale is perhaps the most common scale. The piano keys needed for this scale are shown in figure 3. When we are talking about the distance between the keys, it is called an interval. Remember that the distance between any 2 adjacent keys on the piano is a half step or a semitone, which is the smallest interval that is normally used in Western music. Melody. A melody is a series of successive pitches perceived by the ear to form a coherent whole. Only 1 pitch occurs at a time in a melody. If 2 pitches occur together, you have harmony or counterpoint. Now listen to this example of melody. As you can see, it only has 1 pitch at a time. Now listen to this example of harmony. As you can hear, you have multiple pitches happening together. Most melodies use the 7 notes of a single scale. The song Happy Birthday, which is in the major mode, uses the scale degrees shown in the box at the bottom of this page. It follows the same scale degrees whether you use the C major, F major, E flat major, A major, or any of the 15 major scales. You can transpose the melody Happy Birthday to any major key by beginning the same pattern of intervals on a different note, and it will remain the same melody. Contour. All melodies have a contour or profile. A conjunct melody moves smoothly in stepwise motion. That is, it mostly half steps and whole steps. Row, row, row your boat is a familiar tune using conjunct motion. Apart from merrily, 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 all the intervals are whole steps and half steps. Right? So once again, whenever you have mostly half steps and whole steps in the song, then you are using contour or conjunct melody. Now let's talk about disjunct melody, which contains proportionally more leaps, intervals larger than a major second. The Star-Spangled Banner, for instance, uses far more leaps than steps, so it is disjunct. There is even a melodic leap of a major tenth equivalent to 16 half steps between Gleaming and the Rocket's Red Glare. What they mean by conjunct and disjunct, if you look at the piano keys above, it's like when you're doing conjunct, you're basically pushing this key and then this key and then maybe this key and this key and this key, but you're doing it half steps, right? So from here to here, from here to here, you're staying within this area. So that's a conjunct melody. But when you have something like the Star Spangled Banner, you're not just going to be using this key and this key and this key and this key, which are all next to each other and half and whole steps apart. You're going to go from like here all the way to here and there. So the intervals between are a lot bigger, and that's why it's called a disjunct, because the intervals are larger than a major second. All right, another way to describe a melody's contour is by direction. So remember, a contour is the profile, okay? It's how the melody moves. Let's write that down. Movement, okay? It's where your fingers move upon the keys. Melodies may ascend, that means go right ways, descend, which means to go left, or move in a wave-like manner. Ooh. Row, row, row your boat ascends to the first merrily, then mainly descends to the end. A very common contour for melodies is that of an arc, ascending at the beginning and reaching a climactic high point and descending toward the end. Contour is normally described in general terms. Exact intervals and pitches are named when more precision is needed. Range and register. Here's the next part. Every instrument, including the human voice, has a range of possible pitches that it is capable of producing. So here we go. In order to indicate exactly which A, B, or C sharp, etc. is being played or discussed, each pitch is numbered from the bottom of the grand staff up. C1 through B1, C flat 1, followed by C2 through B2, C flat 2, and so on. A viola's range, C3 to E6, is higher and slightly narrower than a cello's C2 to A5. The high, middle, and low parts of an instrument's range are often called the high, middle, or low register. Or, in Old Man River, in listening example 2, the singer drops into a very low register. So once again, the high, middle, and low parts of an instrument's range are often called the high, middle, or low register. So how high it can go, how low it can go is part of the register. So let's go ahead and listen to listening example 2 called Old Man River. Rhythm. Rhythm, beat, and tempo. Rhythm is the way the audible music is organized in time, while beat refers to the steady pulse that underlies most music. So if you wanted to do the difference between rhythm and beat, rhythm is through time. So how many beats in 1 second, right? Or beat is a little bit different because that refers to the steady pulse. So in order to make rhythm, you need beat, right? And so the rhythm is basically the beats in time. Sometimes the beat is audible, sometimes not, but it is present like the silent or ticking second hand on a mechanical clock. So sometimes you don't hear a beat, and that's why sometimes when you watch musicians play an instrument, especially in an orchestra or band, you will see that they are helping their rhythm by doing the beat with their foot. So you can see them tapping lightly on the floor so that they can see that their beat is correct. Next, we have tempo. The speed of the beat is called tempo. So tempo is speed. Occasionally, the beat slows or pauses. Table 2 shows different tempos and their traditional Italian names. The Italian terms predate the invention of exact timekeeping, so they originally indicated mood or other expressive qualities as related to tempo. For example, allegro means cheerful, and so the music should be executed in a fairly lively or slightly fast manner. The numbers at the left indicate the approximate number of beats per minute. Substantial variations exist in the beats per minute. Tempo can slow down, retardando, or speed up, accelerando, and it can do either gradually, poco a poco, or suddenly, subito. But when there is no steady tempo, which is the same as no noticeable beat, music is said to be unmetered. If there is a perceived beat, but it speeds up and slows down for expressive effect, it is called rubato. So there's different kinds of beats, and remember guys, the beat will definitely affect that they're trying to express. So if you want to be cheerful, or you want to be you want to create a feeling of anticipation, you may do a little livelier or faster beat. While when you want to show something a little subdued or melancholy, you may do a slow beat. Now let's go ahead and look at the different beats per minute and the Italian terms that refer to them. At 200 beats per minute, we have presto. At 120 beats per minute, we have allegro. which is pretty fast, but not very fast, right? At 108 beats per minute, we have moderato, which is a moderate beat. At 84 beats per minute, we have andante, which is at a walking tempo. At 72 beats per minute, we have adagio, which is pretty slow. And with the slowest, we have lento or grave, which is at 40 beats per minute. Now, you don't have to remember the number of beats per minute for each of these terms. However, you do have to know which one's the fastest versus which is the slowest. Now let's talk about rhythmic notation. There are several symbols that indicate how long a note should last. An oval note called a whole note is the longest symbol used today. A line called a stem can be added to the oval, and that oval plus stem symbol indicates a time value that is half as long as the whole note or a half note. So remember, if you have a whole note, it is just a regular oval. Okay, if you have a stem that's added to the oval, then that means that it is a half note. Okay, when the oval or note head is solid black, that indicates a quarter note. Okay, so that's 1/4. And a note that is half as long as a half note and 1/4 the duration of a whole note, right? So a quarter note is half of a half note and a quarter of a whole note. I think you guys know fractions, hopefully, so that won't be too crazy. When a flag is added to the stem, the quarter note is halved in duration, so that is called an eighth note. Additional flags can be added, each subdividing the value of the note by half again. You can have 16th notes, you can have 32nd notes, and so forth, right? So let's go ahead and see what these look like. Here's the whole note right there, okay? There's the half note. Do you guys see how it's an open oval? There's a quarter note, so that's a 1/4. So this is 1/2 of a whole. This is a quarter, right? That's supposed to be a 4. So you can see the difference is that this is not shaded in, and the quarter note is shaded in. An eighth note has a little stem. Do you see that little stem right there? That makes it an eighth note, so it's 1/8 of a whole. Okay. Then we have a 16th note with 2 stems and a 32nd note with 3 stems. And you can also see that when they're not in singular fashion, you can connect them as well. So the number of bars also indicates its 16th or 8th placement. I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples so you can listen to what that sounds like. If a whole note is 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. Then a half note is 2 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4. A quarter note is 1 beat per, so 1, 2, 3, 4. And an eighth note is 2 beats per note, so 1, 2, 3, 4. The relationships of the most common note symbols are shown in figure 4, which we just talked about. Notice that multiple flag notes have an alternate notation called beams. These are sometimes easier for a musician to read quickly since it is customary to beam together a beat's worth of notes. Those are called beams, guys. That's a beam, and those are beams, okay? Beams. Let's write that down. All right. Another device used in rhythmic notation is the dot. A dot adds half the original value to the note. So you're adding half of that note anytime you have a dot. So you don't just play the note, but also half of that note. So a dot following a half note would represent a quarter note, and thus the total duration of a dotted half note should be a half note plus a quarter note. So it would be like 75%, right, of a whole note. So once again, just by having that dot, you're playing that note plus half of what that note represented. Also, notes of the same pitch can be connected with a curved line called a tie. It ties their values together so that the note lasts as long as their combined values. The note value symbols are in the top of figure 4. Right? Indicate how long musical sound should last, but musicians can also be told how long not to make sound. These symbols for silence are called rests. So anytime you're not supposed to be playing. And they follow a similar hierarchy as the note values. The lower half of figure 4 illustrates the standard rest symbols and their equivalent note symbols and how each rest should be placed on a staff. The placement is especially important for a whole rest and half rest. They look identical otherwise. So once again, here we go. Okay, so we have the dots, we have the rests, okay? Rhythm is syncopated when accented or emphasized notes fall on weak beats or in between beats. So syncopation is a little bit different. Okay, syncopation is when you have the accent on the other thing, the one that you wouldn't normally expect the accent. The rhythms in Happy Birthday are regular and coincide with the beat, so it is not considered syncopated. The rhythms in Lost Your Head Blues, however, do not coincide with the beat. Many notes fall just before the beat. Each as the bye of baby. Didn't is stressed because it is longer, sustained between the second and third beats. Syncopation is a prized rhythm component of ragtime and jazz, as heard in I Got Rhythm, Rhapsody in Blue, and In the Mood. We're not going to listen to those three, but I want you guys to listen to Lost Your Head Blues right now, real quickly.
I was with you, baby, when you did all have a dime. Now since you got plenty money, you have thrown your good gal down.
And as you can see, you'll hear the rhythm is syncopated, right? So the notes fall just before the beat. So instead of doing the beats at bay, B, it's baby, right before the B of baby. Do you hear that? That would be what syncopation is, right? When you have beats between beats or beats that you wouldn't normally stress as stressed. Then we have polyrhythm. Polyrhythm is also called cross rhythm, which occurs when two conflicting rhythmic patterns are present simultaneously. The most common, as shown in figure 5, are 2 against 3, the upper example, and 3 against 4, the lower example. Note that the meter does not change. In the first movement of Quartet for the End of Time, which is listening example 14, the 4 instruments play polyrhythmic patterns. So once again, it happens when 2 conflicting rhythmic patterns are present simultaneously. Okay, so if you look at the example in figure 5, it says that the upper example and the lower example, right there, we have 2 and we have 3, right? So while these 2 are playing, these 3 are playing. So when you have those cross rhythms, because obviously this is at a different rhythm than this is, right? But you will have these 2 things being played at the same time. So when you have 2 different rhythms being played at the same time, it's called polyrhythm, poly actually means many, or cross rhythm, because you're crisscrossing 2 different rhythms. Now let's move on to harmony and common practice tonality. Harmony occurs whenever 2 or more tones are sounding simultaneously. In Western cultures, pitch and harmony are typically organized using common practice tonality, also called common practice harmony. So tonality and harmony are the same. You guys know what harmony is, guys. It's when you have people singing the same thing, but they're doing it in different keys or different tones, to be more exact. Here's an example of harmony. All right, this system was developed in Europe beginning in the Middle Ages around 1750. Since then, layers of complexity have been added. Vigorous challenges have been made by various composers, and knowledge of non-Western music traditions has increased dramatically. Despite these changes, conventions of common practice tonality govern nearly all of the music produced or consumed in the Western world. Now let's talk about chords. A chord is 3 or more pitches sounding simultaneously. A book or a forearm pressed down on a piano key will create a chord. However, the most common and useful chords do not employ immediately adjacent pitches. In music theory, the key is the world of pitch relationships within which a piece or substantial section of music takes place. Key in music theory is not to be confused with the piano key that you press to produce a single pitch. In terms of harmony, the key of a piece of music is the set of 7 tones or scale that has been selected for use in that piece. A chord is used a lot like in regular pop music. When you play any song, you can actually play it with chords. So instead of playing like in a piano, where's the piano picture? Instead of playing just this for the C, you can play this and this and this. and even this to get the chord of C. So you're playing multiple things, and that would be the chord of C. I want you guys to understand that a chord is 3 or more pitches. So you have to be playing 3 keys or more to make the sound of the C, or to make a sound of an E, or the F. Now let's talk about key signature. The key signature is a set of sharps or flats at the beginning of every staff that indicates the key of the music. The key signature signals which 7 pitches make up the scale for that piece by indicating which pitches will be consistently raised or lowered. When an F sharp appears in the key signature at the beginning of the piece, that means all Fs in the entire composition are automatically raised unless otherwise indicated, which would be done with a natural sign in front of the individual note. The key signature is a convenient. See the E major scale in figure 6, shown on the keyboard and in 2 versions of the staff. The first notated version uses an accental in front of each affected pitch. The second notated version begins with a key signature of 4 sharps, indicating that the performer needs to sharpen any F, C, G, or D pitches he or she encounters. Okay, what did I just talk about? What is a key signature? This is all it means, guys. When you look at music, okay, when you look at written music, instead of having to put a sharp next to every single letter, every single note like this, okay, they make it easier by putting it here, okay, right before you play, so that you know for the entire song, all of these keys are going to be sharps. Harmonic progression. Harmonic progression is a series of chords or intervals that moves from tension, dissonance, towards resolution, consonance. So tension, that means like conflict, and resolution is like peace, right? Dissonance is the quality of a pitch, interval, or chord that makes it seem unstable or tense. The more dissonant a sound, the more the listener longs to hear a resolution. So it can be like more of a conflicting sound, right? The opposite of dissonance is consonance, the quality of a pitch, interval, or a chord that makes it seem a suitable point or rest or resolution. Liturgie de Cristal, listed in example 14, employs considerable amounts of dissonance. So let's listen to it right now. Dissonance is relative. Some chords can sound dissonant or consonant depending upon what precedes them. Ears accustomed to Western music expect dissonance to resolve. Tension is created as the listener waits for a tense interval or chord to come to resolution in something more restful. Dissonance and its resolution are central to harmonic progression. An example of this is the tritone. Play an F and B together on the piano, the T notes in figure 7. So if you play an F and a B, okay, on a piano, then you have a tritone. The 2 most natural sounding resolutions are either G flat and B flat, or E and C, as shown by O notes on the keyboard diagrams in figure 7. Try playing the tritone followed by its resolution a few times, then try playing it backwards, the O notes before the T notes, to see if there is a way to make the tritone sound more restful than the other interval. It is difficult if not impossible. Any chord that contains a tritone will sound more dissonant than a chord without one. Other aspects of musical sound: texture, counterpoint, instrumentation, and more timbre. Besides melody, rhythm, and harmony, a number of factors greatly influence or affect how a performance sounds. Texture in music has a specific meaning. It describes the number of things that are going on at once in a piece of music. The 4 types of texture in Western music are monophony, homophony, polyphony, and heterophony. All right, let's talk about these. Monophonic music consists of a single, because mono means one, accompanied melodic line such as the saxophone, introduction from In the Mood in example 9, or the initial trumpet melody of Fanfare for the Common Man, which is from example 11. Multiple instruments or voices may be playing that melody, but they are all performing the same pitch at the same time. That is, that they are playing one melody in unison. Same pitch, same time equals unison. Homophonic texture has 2 different things going on at once. 2 things, not one thing. One's a melody and a harmonic accompaniment. The accompaniment differs from the melody but plays a clearly subordinate role, as seen in figure 8. Similarly, Robert Johnson accompanies himself on guitar as he sings Crossroad Blues in example number 3. Nearly all popular songs today employ homophonic texture. As listeners, we focus on the voice, but the voice is supported by the background instrument. Sometimes the accompaniment lines move in the same rhythm as the melody itself, as the lower voices in a church hymn or chorale, but the notes of the accompanying voices fill out the chord pitches. They are not independent melodies.
Fell down on my knees. At the Lord above our mercy.
In polyphonic texture, however, two or more separate melodies unfold simultaneously. Each could stand alone, but the composer created them to relate to each other on a note-by-note basis while retaining their independence. There are two main types of polyphony: counterpoint and imitative polyphony. In counterpoint, the simultaneous melodies are usually in different registers. There are different melodies, each has its own pitches, contour, shape, and rhythm, but they follow the same beat. Most importantly, their pitches fit into the same harmonic progression. The two or more melodies are carefully coordinated by the composer on a note-by-note basis. Any dissonances or non-harmonic tones must occur within a complicated and detailed set of parameters. If the rules are broken, the music will not sound right to experienced Western ears, and most performers will find the music especially difficult to play or sing. The rules are a bit like grammar rules. They were created to describe a complex process, but can also be used in a prescriptive way to create successful sentences. Composing counterpoint is a bit like completing a difficult number puzzle like Sudoku or a diagramless crossword puzzle. Every choice affects many other choices. When complete, everything fits together in a complex but fulfilling system in which vertical and horizontal components mesh at every point of intersection. Imitative polyphony, on the other hand, features only one melody, but it is played by multiple people at staggered intervals, such as the way that children are taught to sing Row Row Your Boat. Each group sings the same tune, but starts at slightly later in time. So it's like when somebody sings Row Row Your Boat gently down the stream, and by the time you sing maybe the row, row, row your boat, and you're saying gently down the stream, another group is going to start singing row, 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 row your boat. So basically everyone's singing a different, the same exact song, but at different times so that it still makes sense. If two performers are producing versions of the same melody at the same time but are not playing in precise unison, that is, each has its own slight differences, the texture is called heterophony. Heterophonic texture is fairly rare in Western music, but was employed quite often in the earliest styles of jazz. Instrumentation, the instrument or combination of instruments used, is among the most noticeable features of a given piece of music. If the pitches of a melody fall within the range of an instrument, that instrument can play the melody. An electric guitar playing Happy Birthday sounds quite different from a piano playing it, yet even a small child will recognize it as the same tune. If the same pitches were divided up and given to members of a symphony or orchestra, a marching band, or a four-part choir, the effect would be drastically different each time. Arranging is the art of taking an existing piece of music, melody, harmony, or rhythm, and giving instructions as to what each individual performer should play. Two different arrangements of Happy Birthday for the same combination of instruments may sound very different. So maybe you can have one part being sung and another part being played by a violin, and then one part being played by everyone together, and another part be with like more of an emphasis on the drums, and then another part with no drums, right? So that's the arrangement. It's arranging which individual does which part. Two different arrangements of Happy Birthday can have very different sounds depending upon which instruments are given prominent as opposed to secondary or background roles. For much 20th century music, both popular and classical, the choice of instruments and the way they are combined play a central role in making each piece a unique work of art. In the Banshee, which is listed in example 4, Cowell takes an old instrument, the piano, and requires the performer to employ new playing techniques, producing unexpected tone colors. In the absence of common practice harmony, many 20th century compositions use changes in timbre to mark changes in form. In popular music, many listeners can distinguish styles, rockabilly, Motown, bluegrass, disco, punk, or house, after hearing just a few seconds of music due to the differences in characteristic combinations of instruments and timbres. Dynamics, articulation, and ornamentation. Dynamics, the loudness and softness of a sound, are useful to performers and composers for expressive purposes. Table 3 shows the common Italian terms for different dynamic levels and their abbreviations. The full name of the modern piano is pianoforte because, unlike its keyboard predecessors, it could play both quietly, piano, and loudly, forte, in response to changes in the pianist's touch. So if you press upon the keys very quiet, very softly, then it would be piano, and if you press on them very strongly, then you would have forte. A gradual increase from soft and quiet to loud and strong is called a crescendo, and a gradual decrease from something very forte and strong and loud to something very quiet and like the piano is called a decrescendo or diminuendo. In a score, either the abbreviations cres or dim or symbol shaped like an elongated V rotated 90 degrees clockwise for crescendo or counterclockwise, which is basically this, guys, this, okay? Indicate a gradual change in volume. The dynamic level for even a single pitch can change multiple times if its duration is long enough. Imagine a consonant chord, such as the first syllable of Amen, at the end of a sacred piece of music. Swelling from a soft to a loud dynamic, then decrescendoing back to a whisker, a very dramatic effect, like Amen, right? And another expressive factor affecting the sound of a piece is articulation. Real quickly, let's go back up here. These are just the symbols for how loud the music is supposed to be. You have pianissimo, you have piano, mezzo piano, mezzo forte, forte fortissimo, and fortissimo. Okay? All right, let's keep going. Articulation has to do with the mechanics of starting and ending a sound. Staccato indicates that the performer should shorten the duration of a note rather than letting it sound for its full value. So a staccato is like little tiny hits to the piano. It's very like little tiny punctuation marks, basically, okay? This produces extra silence before the next note, often making the musical phrase sound crisper or choppier. Legato means multiple pitches are played in a smooth, connected, but not overlapping manner. On a keyboard, one can produce staccato by poising the finger above a key and pecking down quickly, then quickly returning the finger to its original position. On wind instruments, players use their tongue to produce a distinct beginning for a given pitch. On a violin, the bow may be bounced from the string or the finger used to pluck it, called pizzicato. Mezzian requires the performer to pluck piano strings during the banshee. Legato involves leaving the finger with the weight of the arm balanced on it on the key until it is time for the next pitch, at which the weight is transferred to another finger on the next key. An accent involves more sudden sound than a staccato, and unlike staccato, silent space before the next pitch is not required. Various degrees of pressure, tonguing, and bow pressure all contribute to articulation. Ornamentation refers to localized embellishments. What can you do to make it have that extra oomph, right? A pop singer can swoop into a pitch, and a trumpet player can add a trill, a rapid oscillation between two adjacent notes to the last pitch of a melody as a grand finale. The singer Ethel Merman adds occasional ornaments during I Got Rhythm.
Along, I'm chipper all the day, happy with my lot. How do I get that way?
The high woodwinds sustain a trill near the start of American Salute. Which is the real music? Scores, recordings, and performance. Music theory traditionally describes pieces of music as if they were fixed objects. However, it is important to remember that most music is performed by living people. Music notation is able to convey something's precisely pitch relationships, rhythms, instrumentation, and to some degree phrasing, dynamics, and articulation. Yet it also has obvious limitations. We could not know how smoothly people in the 1870s performed a legato phrase. Recording technology has allowed us to preserve far more information than notation allows, but this too is limited in different ways. An entire subfield called performance practice exists to address the question: how did the music really sound? So now let's go ahead and talk about the section 2 summary. Music is sound organized in time. Developed over centuries in the Western world, common practice tonality is the widely accepted system for describing the relationship among pitches and harmonies. Pitch is the highest or lowest of a sound. It is the basic building block for melody and harmony. Harmony occurs when two or more pitches sound simultaneously. The octave occurs naturally in the overtone series. Western tradition divides it into 12 equal intervals called half steps. Melody is a coherent succession of pitches perceived as a whole with a beginning, middle, and end. Major and minor scales are sets of 7 different pitches arranged in a specific pattern of whole and half steps within a single octave. Beat is the steady, regular pulse underlying most music. Tempo is the speed of the beat. Rhythm is the series of durations of varying lengths that overlie the beat. A key is a hierarchical set of harmonic and melodic pitch relationships using one of the 30 major and minor scales. Texture, counterpoint, dynamics, articulation, and ornamentation are important features that can distinguish otherwise similar musical sounds. Music can be represented by diagrams with notation or on sound recordings, each which has its own limitations. Because music is an art form that structures time rather than space, some people consider it an activity rather than a fixed object. And that is it for today's lesson on music, notation, and music theory. This is everything that you were supposed to read for before the next meeting that we're going to have on Friday. And so I hope you guys have been following along, highlighting things, and looking into what all of these things mean. I hope you guys finish your note cards. As long as you read up until page 30, and you watched my 2 videos and did the note cards, you're all ready for our next meeting. Thank you so much for your hard work. I know that you're trying to enjoy your holiday season, but I appreciate the fact that many of you guys have been watching these videos and putting in the effort and the time to really do a great job at being a pentathlete. All right, see you guys soon. Goodbye.